So I do have, there's a couple of things in the ideas that the media has been putting forward, one of which is that critical race theory doesn't exist. I think we're all in agreement that it does, even though we might have different definitions for it. The other thing they've been putting forward is that, well, if it does exist, it's not being taught K through 12. Do we disagree on that?
Sean said it beautifully. There's the thing that's actually critical race theory, and then there's the deconstructed term that means literally anything that you want it to mean that's actually being taught in schools, as they say.
So if you don't believe it's being taught in K through 12, what is it that you would oppose in the bills that, why would you oppose a bill that says...
This is what Sean tried to circumvent. It's the moderator's
in the very
fault.
beginning, I know.
Sean tried to circumvent this, and the moderator's like, fuck you, we're going back, we're going directly into this fucking issue. We're going to get stuck in the weeds of how you define CRT.
Well, this is the most fun part of the debate for people. Can't they tell? Look, they're being so dishonest.
I don't know.
Says, let's stop teaching critical race theory when you don't believe it's being taught anyway.
Because, as you said, with the Texas bill, it doesn't actually ban critical race theory, does it? It bans certain concepts that make talking about race
It
harder.
bans critical race praxis, and praxis is an integral component of any Marxian theory. Any critical theory, by the way, critical race theory, any critical theory must have at least 3 components. This is according to Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, Entry on Critical Theory. The 3 components it must contain are that it must contain an idealized vision for society. It must be able to critique the existing society for not living up to or moving toward that idealized vision for society. And it must also inspire social activism and be able to be put into practice. So a critical theory requires praxis. So critical race theory requires critical praxis. If you read Paulo Freire, everything about the theory is praxis. If you read any of these folks, it's seriously, it's always praxis, praxis, praxis. It has to be put into praxis or it's not a legitimate critical race theory. So what's being done in schools is the praxis of critical theory, which is taking this stratification view of society and is teaching children by separating them into oppressor and oppressed groups, privileged versus oppressed, teaching them about racial privilege, attaching it to racial identity, telling people through culturally responsive teaching that different cultures have different races have different cultures, which is a fundamentally racist idea. I literally just met a black man the other day who sat here and talked to me about freaking anime for like an hour.
Just out of curiosity, are you?
Here's a total weeb.
So just out of curiosity, are you?
It's true. Anime will be the great uniter.
Yeah, I love it.
Unites us along all lines.
Of course.
Thank you. Thank you, anime. Based anime.
You quite
Unless you like shitty anime like Doomer, like that terrible Akira movie.
intentionally redefining what critical race theory means in the public mind, expanding it as a catch-all for the new racial orthodoxy? Is that what you're doing, just out of curiosity?
I actually did not understand what you said because of the echo. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you quite...
Never apologize, James. What are you doing? You're destroying it here. Don't say you're sorry.
It's a good way. It's a good dismantling tactic.
To say you're sorry?
Yeah, well, you just took all the steam and energy out of what he just said.
Oh, okay.
Intentionally redefining what critical race theory means in the public mind, expanding it as a catch-all for the new racial orthodoxy, so that we can't actually talk about what it says. And now instead of ironically,
I'm not Chris Rufo. I'm a stealth bomber.
Ironically, instead of viewing
Look, he loves that. He loves that.
I don't think James is very stealth on Twitter.
Want to fill everyone in on what they're talking about there? There's so much in this conversation that is like you wouldn't get unless you're following these.
Well, I assume what he means is that, you know, Chris Rufo has become the public face for the anti-CRT movement.
Exactly.
And James is the stealth bomber. He's the one dropping the ideological bombs from the
truth
background
bombs
that maybe, you know, the mainstream obviously isn't, you know, that tuned into his presence.
Yeah.
But
it's kind of cool.
It is cool, but it's just funny for, you know, if you see James on Twitter, I would not ever categorize it as being stealth in anything.
Yes. Stealth is not really, yes. Bomber, yes.
Maybe
one of those
if
loud,
James,
noisy bombers.
Yes. One of those stealth bombers that we saw a couple weeks ago that had the anime girls brightly paint all over.
Yeah, exactly.
The plane. You're like, oh, look, this anime girl is dropping a giant bomb on me from the sky. Okay.
Each individual case as an individual case, yeah, there are definitely teachers out there who put out really bad assignments. And now, ironically, instead of treating those as individual cases of bad conduct, now we can blame it on this catch-all theory that says the exact opposite.
Wait a minute. I live in a bizarro world here. Okay. So so Jangles, the leftist, okay, the guy who says we need to look at everything as being part of a system and as being part of a larger structure, is now saying, why are you looking at these individual cases as being part of a system, James. These are just individual cases that should be looked at on an individual level. There's no systems here. There's no structures here.
He's going full anti-system. What's going on here?
What's happening?
Did he
What's
just
going
change his
on?
position midstream here?
That's hilarious.
Opposite of what he says it is. I know
What
you're-
I'm
I know-
saying, so you can be clear, what critical race theory is, in its simplest brass tacks that's being taught in schools, is dividing people by racial category into privileged class versus oppressed class, in maybe a complicated way, but nevertheless. So talking about racial privilege as a key component to understanding how race creates inequality, and secondly, teaching about the need for racial equity as a redistribution scheme that eventually leads to racial justice through some
disagree with that?
process of applying it long enough.
Actually, all that's pretty good. I just don't
It's
know what's
not
wrong.
good.
Hold on.
It's communism.
Hold on. Yeah, all that was pretty based.
See,
Yeah, no,
Well, there you go.
Mask off.
The mask fell off. Good job.
Sounds good.
what now?
Sounds good. I
based.
won. Yeah. Base socialism. There you go.
What he
communism.
never does. What he never does is say what's wrong with any of that.
it didn't work last time. It won't.
So I don't know. This is where I feel like I'd be like, you really got to just nail down like, oh, okay. So just so everyone's clear, you're endorsing Marxism and you agree that CRT is race Marxism. Because that you just said everything
This
I
is-
said
yeah, I
sounds
know.
based. Okay.
This
It's
is
really
time to do that. Nail
yeah,
him down.
really nail him down there.
Work this time. Okay. Work this time.
So you agree
but-
that that's being taught, but you agree that it should be taught. You think it should be taught that
Thank
people
you.
should be divided up into oppressor and
Good
oppressed within in the
moderator.
classroom.
No, because that's not critical race theory. It was what I was talking about. If there are individual instances,
See, he just said that that's not critical race theory.
Right. But that's the game they always play.
Right.
They say, oh, what you just said is amazing, but that's not what CRT is.
So what are these privilege walks in if it's not critical race theory?
It's, that's just teaching history, Adam. Okay.
I know, it's like I don't
That's
get
just
it.
teaching history.
Seems
Don't you
like
understand?
it's teaching present, not history.
Right.
I mean, if you're doing a privilege walk, you're singling out
right.
different factors that people have today, right now.
Exactly.
I don't get it.
Prince Charming for $20 says everything CRT attributes to race is explained by greed. The slave trade is greed, segregation is greed, war on drugs is greed. Yeah, maybe not everything, but a lot of almost everything. A lot of these things are greed and income issues. I would agree, and wealth issues. Yeah.
Is greed good or bad in that equation?
Well, on that equation, it's not.
Greed drives so much, though. I mean, I don't know.
It can be used for
categorizing.
good. Well, no, you have to channel greed properly. That's society has to channel the negative desires of human beings into being productive in some fashion. And that's part of why capitalism is so genius, because that's what it does. Now, but obviously there's a continuing arms race between regulations and people trying to take advantage of the situation by fucking over other people. And that's where society has to step in.
Yeah.
Evan Samus for $20 says, you guys should listen to the Daily Show interview with Kimberly Crenshaw. They said something to the effect of, quote, it's obviously not Marxism, right? That's amazing. I didn't know that was even a thing. I definitely will have to check that out.
Yeah. I didn't know that either.
Unfortunately, it's an hour long, so maybe we'll do a whole stream on that.
Kimberly Crenshaw.
Yeah, there's an hour-long interview, Kimberly Crenshaw, with not Trevor Noah, but two people that work for the Daily Show, I guess.
Oh, okay.
So I'll check that out. Yeah.
of like bad classroom activities, yeah, critique those. But you keep saying that critical race theory says that it's things that it specifically doesn't. So, for example,
Iron
who here
law of
thinks,
woke projection.
Who here thinks that critical race theory says that white people are inherently evil?
Oh, right here. Sitch, you're raising your hand, right?
Well, this is the problem. They play all these word games. They'll say like, "Oh, they don't think that white people are biologically inherently evil," but then they act as if they are in everything they say.
Right.
So it's a total talking on both sides of their mouth.
I don't know how you can't. Listen, oppression is evil, Sitch. I
Of course.
firmly agree that if you're categorizing people as oppressor, you're doing that to categorize them as evil. So,
I do agree with that completely.
but CRT categorizes white people as oppressors, right?
What they do, this very dishonest thing where they say, we're not categorically saying all white people are oppressors. and then everything they say under that says that all white people are oppressors.
Right. They're like,
But, like,
read between
not-
the lines, bitch.
Right. So yeah, it's very dishonest the way it's all framed.
It's weird that he's bringing this up because.
Well,
this
he
is
thinks it's a
something-
straw man. He's Joya Reid saying it's obviously not Marxism, right?
Oh, I guess so. Well, I can't wait to hear the straw man, though.
Awesome.
The correct statement is that critical race theory scapegoats whiteness as a form of bourgeois property.
What does it mean
and
by
that
whiteness? What does it mean by whiteness, James?
Do you want me to fucking read it to you?
Oh my God, James is getting triggered here. James is getting fucking triggered.
I know.
He gets triggered worse than me.
Right.
Whiteness
Well,
is
that
a
was the
set
whole book, but
of.
yes, I would assume you could just give me.
But while he's digging that up, I just want to point out that we had every critical race theory discussion ever, and I tried to avoid it by saying, let's not argue about the obscure.
Go fucking Sean. Yes.
Thank you, Sean. Listen,
Just want to point
Sean.
this out. I tried to avoid this shit in the very beginning.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you.
Remember 30 minutes ago?
Well, actually,
legal
you know
theory.
what? Fuck you, Sean. I want this to be a shit show. Okay, this makes for better viewing experience for us.
I know. It's totally devolved into a shit show too.
and talk
All right, how
about it in
about this? Would you-
practice.
All right, Lindsay.
We went through it's not critical race theory, it's not being
Here's-
taught in schools,
here's
and
what's gonna
also it's
happen.
based, I'm kind of in favor of it, which is
White-
how every single one of these conversations happens.
Whiteness
Yes.
is a location of structural advantage of racial privilege. Second is it a standpoint, a place from which white people look at ourselves and others and at society. Third, whiteness refers to a set of cultural practices that are usually unmarked and unnamed. That's on Brandeis Universities. I could talk about whiteness as property,
and what's
which we
wrong with
already
any of
talked
that?
about. But to do this, we have to understand the definition of race.
Are you going to answer what's wrong with that?
So
He goes the full it's
I know.
based.
I know, but it's hilarious how in CRT they're able to basically brand a skin color as having all these negative attributes to it. So it's okay to say, "Oh, I don't hate white people. I hate whiteness." We need to deconstruct whiteness. It's like, fuck you. Everyone knows what you're doing. Okay. You're trying to be coy here. And you're trying to pretend like you're trying to create a way to make it acceptable for you to be openly racist, is all you're doing. That's all that's happening right now.
All of these stereotypes existed about black people in the 1950s and 60s. I mean, all these there's racist stereotypes are as old as time.
Yes.
It's bizarre to me that people are trying to voice these racist stereotypes onto white people now and going as far as teaching them in fucking public school. It's
Right,
so
I mean-
wacky. And then to get all bent out of shape when white people don't really like it. It's
Right,
like, what
I mean-
the fuck?
Just imagine if you had anti-CRT people say, "Oh, well, I'm gonna start. You guys are using this term whiteness. I'm gonna start using the term blackness.
I
I'm gonna
know.
describe all these negative traits of
Yeah.
criminality or antisocial behavior."
Criminality, laziness,
Right. Say,
tardiness.
"Oh, I'm not anti-black.
Yeah.
I'm anti-blackness."
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, let's see how that goes over.
We're-
That
we're
goes
against-
really
we're just-
well.
We're just against blackness. Yeah.
I know.
Sorry,
It's insane.
we're throwing theft in with blackness.
Yeah, it's-
Dishonesty is part of.
I don't know why you
blackness.
guys are calling us racist.
I
I'm very
know.
clearly not anti-black. I'm just anti-blackness. Okay.
I know it's so absurd, and that's why these debates are crazy because
I know.
then they just want to pretend that no, we're not talking about that. You know,
Yes.
hate the sin, but love the sinner, right? Fuck you.
As they're throwing stones at your head,
I know.
trying to brain you, they're saying hate the sin, not the sinner.
Yes. It's so weird. It's so weird. This is what happens. We've had a generation now of people of color that have been raised thinking people of color, it's impossible for them to be racist. That
Yes.
they cannot display any kind of racism. That's like physically impossible for them. That was a giant mistake. That was a huge mistake.
Yeah, it's true.
Anyone can be a racist piece of shit, okay?
Very true. Anyone can be a racist piece of shit.
It's pretty much I feel like it's kind of how we're hardwired. If we don't have cultural pressures pushing against it, everyone's going to devolve into being a racist piece of shit. And CRT comes along and they're like, well, not only are we not against these social pressures that prevent people from becoming racist pieces of shit, we want to develop an institution that
It cultivates
that
them.
cultivates people being racist pieces of shit. What do you think?
It's so
No,
funny
I
'cause
think it's terrible.
it's like, hey, listen, we want to take all your racist tendencies and we want to institutionalize it. Okay?
Yes.
Let's create
Yes.
It's actually hilarious. It's literally CRT is the race left version of Julius Evola. It's saying, I want to take all your racism and I want to solidify it in a framework so that everyone can use.
Or even, I mean, there have been other religions like this. Think of Mormonism. It's like, let's institutionalize men get 20 wives. I think that would be a good institution to have.
There you go. There you
Why?
go.
What women? Why are you bitching about this? Come on.
What are you
What's
complaining
wrong with
about?
you?
Yeah.
Guys who don't get a wife because the head preacher has 20 women to himself. What? You can go live somewhere else.